I stood at the threshold, the door shutting behind my own daughter like I was the ghost of someone she'd already buried. "You'll die alone just like you lived," she'd said. My daughter, my blood. The baby I once rocked through colic and storms. Now she looked at me like a stranger with no claim and no name. But what she didn't know was, the will had already changed, and the silence she left me with was the same one she'd inherit. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The roast had gone cold. Steam no longer rose from the mashed potatoes. Forks scraped plates, too quietly, too carefully, like no one wanted to be the first to break the tension that clung to the air like humidity before a summer storm. Nancy dabbed at her mouth with her cloth napkin, eyes flicking from Eleanor to Catherine and back again, sensing it coming. Like a scent on the wind before lightning strikes. "I don't know why you keep acting like you were some great mother," Catherine muttered, her voice sharp enough to slice through bone. She didn't raise it. She didn't need to. Eleanor set down her glass. Her hands were steady, her face unreadable. "You think because you wrote checks and dropped off casseroles that you were present?" Catherine's voice wavered, not from weakness but from restrained fury. "You abandoned us the second Dad died. You've never loved anyone but yourself." David looked down at his plate as if it were suddenly the most fascinating thing in the room. The tines of his fork trembled slightly in his grip. Mia's chair creaked. "Cat," she whispered, but Catherine shot her a look that cut the words off in her sister's throat. "No, we're done pretending. You've been sitting in this house like a queen on a throne made of paper lies, acting like this family still means something to you. But let's be real." Catherine leaned in, eyes locked on Eleanor's with a smile that didn't reach her cheeks. "You're going to die alone just like you lived." The sentence landed like a slap. No one moved. Even the air seemed to recoil. David's fork hit his plate with a soft clink. Mia stood abruptly. "Excuse me," she whispered, and fled down the hall, the soft thuds of her footsteps vanishing into the back of the house. Nancy's wineglass paused midair. Her mouth twitched like she wanted to say something, but thought better of it. Eleanor didn't flinch. She picked up her fork, cut another piece of roast, ate it slowly. Only after she swallowed did she speak, her tone maddeningly calm. "Well," she said, "thank you for the honesty." Then she began gathering plates. Catherine blinked, as if unsure the words had landed. Nancy watched, silent and calculating. David rose to help, but Eleanor waved him off with a flick of her hand. "I've got it," she said, as she carried the first load into the kitchen. Behind her, Nancy muttered under her breath to no one in particular, "That line's going to cost her." Later that night, when the house had quieted and the guests had scattered like dry leaves in wind, Eleanor sat at her desk. The room was immaculate, always was. The desk lamp cast a soft amber glow over her leather-bound planner. She opened it, flipped to today's date, and wrote in elegant, unhurried cursive. October 11th. "You're going to die alone just like you lived." Catherine, she underlined it once, then again. There was no emotion on her face, just precision. She slipped the page into a crisp manila folder labeled Estate Review. Final, the folder joined 3 others in a locked drawer. She clicked the pen closed, tucked it away. In the distance, a grandfather clock chimed once. Eleanor sat perfectly still for a few more moments, then reached for a second folder. Its tab read only one word. Catherine. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes didn't blink. And across town, in a 3rd-story apartment filled with unpacked boxes and fraying nerves, Catherine slept like someone who had won something. Like someone who thought the war had ended at dinner. It hadn't. It had just begun. Eleanor's heels clicked sharply across the marble floor of the First Harbor Bank, each step deliberate, echoing louder than necessary in the cavernous lobby. The glass doors swung shut behind her with a hush of sealed judgment. She walked past the greeter with a nod, cutting straight to the customer service counter. A young banker with perfect posture and an eager smile rose from behind the desk. "Mrs. Wren, of course," he said. "Right this way." They settled into a frosted glass cubicle at the back. Eleanor removed her gloves one finger at a time and laid them neatly on the table beside her handbag. "I'd like a full transaction history for my primary checking account," she said. Of course. A particular range? Last 9 months. Every detail. Her tone invited no questions. He tapped away at the keyboard, then swiveled the screen toward her. Here we are. I can print this for you. No, I want to look at it first. Rows of transactions scrolled under her eyes. Grocery charges, utility payments, donations to the library. And then her gaze froze. There it was. May 3rd, ACH withdrawal. Loan repayment, KRM Solutions, $4,800. Her lips tightened. She scrolled again. June 5th, AC withdrawal. Loan repayment, KRM Solutions, $3,200. July 2nd, AC withdrawal. $5,600. Each one labeled as a loan repayment. Each one signed with her account. None of them authorized. Not by her. Her voice remained level. Who approved these? The banker's brow furrowed. That would have required online login credentials and two-factor. Unless you visited in person to sign a loan agreement. I most certainly did not. He cleared his throat and straightened his tie. Then I'll need to escalate this to our fraud department. If these were unauthorized, the withdrawals are potentially criminal. We'll freeze the account temporarily for your protection. I want paper statements printed, Eleanor said. All of them. And a copy of every authorization form tied to this KRM Solutions. The banker hesitated. You may want to speak with someone from legal as well. Start with the printer. Back at home, the dining room table had transformed into a war room. Manila folders spread across the wood like tiles in a floor plan. Nancy sat at the head, labeling tabs in clean black ink. May, June, July. I always told you to keep paper copies, she muttered. Bank apps are convenient, until someone turns your password into an open bar. I changed it last February, Eleanor said, flipping through the stack of printed statements. To something I've never written down. Nancy stopped writing. Then who the hell knew it? Eleanor didn't answer. The front door creaked open. Mia stepped inside, her movements cautious. Her jacket still had a CVS name badge stuck to the zipper. She glanced at the folders, then at Eleanor. What's all this? Accounting, Eleanor said simply. Mia stood frozen for a second too long. Finally, she said, Mom always said you owed her. For everything. Eleanor's gaze slid toward her youngest, eyes narrowing just slightly. I owe no one. She meant after Dad died. You left. She stayed. She said she made sacrifices. Nancy let out a bitter laugh. Sacrifices. She's been siphoning money, not giving it. Mia flushed. She said she was just getting what was hers, what you wouldn't give willingly. Eleanor placed the July statement flat on the table, a thick black circle drawn around the largest withdrawal. She clicked open a second pen, labeled the page with a single word, fraud. She stood. Pack a bag, Mia. What? You're staying here tonight. But I didn't. I'm not asking. Eleanor's voice wasn't raised. But it had weight now, the voice of someone building something. A wall, a case, or a fire. Nancy watched her sister quietly, then reached for a new folder. She wrote, Legal Options, KW, across the tab. Outside, a wind picked up. Dead leaves scraped against the windows like nails. And somewhere, across town, a Venmo notification chimed. By 8:15 the next morning, Eleanor stood beneath the too bright fluorescence of the Fraud Claims Division like a queen in exile, coiled, dignified, and dangerously quiet. The woman behind the counter wore acrylic nails and a headset. She peered over bifocals at the folder Eleanor slid forward. All of them? The woman asked, flipping the top page. Every last one. It was a stack. Printed statements, copies of her signature, and 5 annotated withdrawals, each marked with red arrows and timestamps Eleanor had matched herself. You'll need to complete a 104 IDM and a 109 FC, the woman said, sliding the forms forward with a practiced hand. They're federal, identity misuse, financial misconduct. Eleanor nodded once and reached for the pen. Take your time. Your handwriting's going to matter. She filled each line with slow, deliberate strokes. Birth date. Last 4 of social. Dates in question. Claimed unauthorized amounts. The ink dried as she moved page to page. When she finished, the clerk examined the documents. You're sharp, she said. Most folks who get ripped off don't even know what's gone until it's too late. It's not too late, Eleanor replied. Not for me. The woman glanced at her, maybe to ask more, but something in Eleanor's expression shut the door before it opened. That afternoon, back at the house, Nancy was on the sunroom couch with a Diet Coke and 2 legal pads, writing like she was plotting a military operation. "Bank said what?" she asked without looking up. "They're flagging all charges to KRM Solutions and beginning an identity theft review." Nancy grunted approvingly. "She wanted your card? Fine. Give her your clauses instead." She gestured toward the manila folders spread across the coffee table. "Preliminary will, revised POA, guardianship exclusions. You want her erased? We make her a ghost." Mia looked up from her laptop in the corner. "Do you want me to back these up?" she asked hesitantly. "PDFs, external drive. Cloud?" "Yes," Eleanor said. "All of it." Mia nodded and reached for the scanner, slipping the documents into the feeder one by one. Her movements had grown steadier since the night before, still nervous, but with purpose now, like someone who realized she was standing closer to a fire than she thought and wasn't sure who lit it. "I also made a spreadsheet," she added quietly. "Timeline of withdrawals, with column notes. I thought it might help." Eleanor paused. "Good." A chime sounded on her phone. An email. She opened it. From Alan Pritchard. Subject: Legal referral. T. Hale, body. Thomas Hale is semi-retired, but still consults. Discreet, high-level estate strategist. Very selective. He's agreed to see you Wednesday at 10:30. He remembers your husband. Bring everything. Eleanor turned to Nancy. "Do you remember a Thomas Hale?" Nancy raised her eyebrows. "Of course. He's the one who found the loophole in Jim Bartlett's prenup. The one that landed his ex-wife, a second house, and the boat. Quiet genius." "I have an appointment," Nancy whistled. "Now we're moving." Mia looked up. Is that bad? If you're hiring someone like that?" Eleanor took her time answering. She leaned over, clicked open the folder labeled Legal Options, KW, and began slipping the scanned statements inside. "It means I'm done warning people," she said. That night, Eleanor sat alone at her desk, the lamp casting soft gold across her freshly typed summary. Working Theory of Access and Intent. Catherine Wren. Motive, Method, Digital Trail. She clicked Save, closed the file, and removed a thin silver USB from the laptop port. She slipped it into a velvet-lined case and pressed it into the safe beside her wedding band and a sealed envelope that hadn't been touched in years. From the hallway, Nancy's voice carried low and steady. "She's not going to see it coming." And just then, a new text blinked across Eleanor's phone screen. "Catherine, you started this. Just remember that." The post went up at 2:03 a.m. A grainy, dim-lit photo of the Wren family's oak dining table. Plates scraped clean. Wine glasses half full. Napkins crumpled with the exhaustion of civility. The caption read, "It's funny how the people who walk away always come back when it's time to divide the money." Family vultures saw truth hurts. No names, no tags, just venom disguised as candor. But Eleanor saw it for what it was. By 2:08, she had taken 4 screenshots. Full image, post caption, timestamp, user handle. She cropped nothing. At 2:11, she emailed them to herself and printed each one on thick archival-grade paper. No reply, no rebuttal, no escalation. She just filed them. By noon the next day, the neighbors had begun quietly unfollowing Catherine's page. The Hollands, the Tuckers, even that strange couple across the cul-de-sac with the telescope and the fountain lights. One by one, connections dried up like a dying vine. Eleanor didn't reach out to anyone. She didn't have to. Small towns handled their own justice. Thomas Hale's office was housed in the upper floor of a converted firehouse, the old brick facade untouched, the interior now white oak and frosted glass. The smell of lavender oil and old legal texts filled the waiting room like a memory wrapped in leather. He was taller than Eleanor remembered, thinner too, but his eyes were sharp as ever behind round tortoiseshell glasses. He took the printed screenshots with gloved fingers, flipping through slowly. "She posted this publicly. Yes. No setting restrictions." "No," he nodded. "Then this is more than drama. It's motive." He tapped one printout. "This phrasing, divide the money, and the timestamp alone place her emotional state post-discovery. Combined with the financial trail we already have, it supports intent. Eleanor said nothing, letting him speak in clean legal lines. She wanted the words to pile up, one brick after another. Thomas reached into a drawer and pulled out a form. This is a formal revocation of financial power of attorney. Did you ever assign Catherine? Temporarily, after my surgery, I forgot to rescind it. He raised his eyebrows. You're lucky she didn't empty your accounts then. She took her time, Eleanor replied. But she took. He filled in the date and passed the form across the desk. I'll need your signature in triplicate. Initial each clause. I've inserted a preemptive clause blocking her from claiming medical decision-making power as well. Eleanor read every word slowly, not out of mistrust, but because she understood the value of ink on paper. The silence in the room was broken only by the scratching of her pen. When she was done, Thomas gathered the documents, tapped them into a neat stack, and slid them toward Nancy, who had sat quietly through it all, legs crossed, eyes watchful. You're the witness. I'm the sister, Nancy replied. But yes. Thomas handed her a fine-point pen. Then watch her sign, again, here and here. They moved like clockwork, a deadly, elegant ritual. When it was finished, Thomas folded one of the signed copies into a sealed envelope. Keep this in your safe. I'll file the others through our expedited process. Legally, she now has no claim, no access, no power, no standing. Eleanor nodded once. Good. Nancy stood, brushing imaginary lint off her coat. Can you make that retroactive to birth? She muttered. Thomas allowed himself the hint of a smile. I'll be in touch within the week, he said. If she retaliates online again, let me know immediately. That will help establish escalation. And pattern. He paused. One more thing. If she's bold enough to post, she's bold enough to provoke you. She won't get the chance, Eleanor said. But as they stepped outside, wind curling around their coats, Eleanor's phone buzzed in her pocket. Another tag. Another post. This one was just a screenshot of the fraud warning from her bank, with the caption, "Funny how the ones pointing fingers are the ones hiding the most." Paper trails go both ways. Nancy peered over her shoulder. Oh, she's digging her own grave, she whispered. Let her keep going. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. I'm counting on it. The sky over Harbor County hung low and colorless when Eleanor returned to Thomas Hale's office. A faint drizzle misted the glass door as she entered. Her reflection blurring, two faces merging into one. The woman she'd been and the one who had finally decided what would be left behind. Thomas greeted her with a quiet nod. You came prepared. Eleanor set her leather folio on the table. Everything's in order. I want this done before the weekend. Nancy followed behind, carrying a thermos and a look that said she'd rather be anywhere else, but wasn't about to miss the finale. She means before Catherine wakes up from whatever moral coma she's in. Thomas motioned toward the conference table. 3 identical stacks waited there, paper, seal, and fountain pen aligned with military precision. He adjusted his glasses. You understand this is final once filed. Contestable, yes, but only through litigation. That's why we're adding a clause, Eleanor said evenly. A very specific one. Thomas nodded, opening the first draft. Let's review from the top. The reading began quietly, paragraphs like scripture, deliberate and unbroken. Eleanor's estate had been vast once, but what remained was still enough to alter lives. 2 properties, 3 portfolios, the rights to her late husband's patents. As Thomas read, Eleanor's gaze stayed fixed on the window. Her reflection blinked back, calm and hollow. Clause 12, Thomas continued. Beneficiaries. Currently listed as Catherine Wren, primary, David Wren, and Mia Wren, secondary, equal share. He paused, looked up. Eleanor's voice came soft, almost kind. Strike Catherine entirely. Nancy's pen froze mid-note. Thomas set the page down. You're certain. Utterly. He made a neat diagonal slash through the name, ink slicing paper like a scalpel. Replace her with joint beneficiaries, David and Mia Wren. Equal share, contingent upon each contributing a minimum of 200 volunteer hours annually to community programs of their choosing. Thomas looked at her over his glasses. You're requiring service. I'm requiring character, she corrected. They need to earn what comes next. He continued, his voice steady but his eyes slightly widened. Clause 15. Establishment of a charitable trust. Details? Eleanor opened her folio and pulled out a typed draft she'd written herself. The title read, The Grant Literacy Fund. For children who can read a room before they can read a book, she said quietly. I want $50,000 set aside to start. It grows from there. Nancy gave a low whistle. You're leaving your legacy in words. Fitting. Eleanor turned to her. If words built my life, words will settle it. Thomas leaned back. You're creating something permanent, Eleanor. This isn't retaliation. It's architecture. She gave the faintest smile. Architecture holds even when family doesn't. He moved on. Clause 17. You mentioned a no contest provision. Yes. Anyone who challenges this will forfeit everything, including sentimental items. No exceptions. Thomas wrote it in longhand, murmuring as he did. Upon any contestation of intent or distribution, the contesting party shall receive nothing. He underlined the final word. Nancy shifted in her chair. I could frame that. Thomas glanced up. You may want to keep this private for now. Oh, don't worry, Eleanor said. Catherine prefers public stages. I'll leave her the silence she despises. When the review ended, Thomas reached for his seal. The room filled with the slow hiss of wax and the decisive press of metal. He lifted it carefully, revealing the impression. Thomas J. Hale, Notary Public. 2 copies for filing, he said. 1 for your safe. Nancy took the sealed document reverently, as if holding a live wire. It's done then? It's begun, Eleanor corrected. They walked out into the drizzle. The courthouse bell struck noon in the distance, dull and echoing, like the closing of a door. Nancy broke the silence first. You think she'll hear about it? Eleanor didn't answer. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. An email notification. Subject, Family Statement, Going Public Tonight. From Catherine Wren. Body, if you think you can erase me on paper, try doing it online. Everyone deserves the truth. Nancy saw the color drain slightly from her sister's face. Not fear, but recognition. Eleanor looked up at the slate sky. Then we'll both be published, she said quietly. She tucked the sealed envelope beneath her arm, rain already spotting the wax. And as she walked toward the car, the first roll of thunder trembled across the harbor, low, deliberate, inevitable. The envelope arrived by courier, cream-colored, heavy, no return address, just a bold serif letterhead stamped in dark green. Hollis and Trent, LLP, Estate Dispute Division. Nancy spotted it first on the porch bench, tucked beneath the morning paper. She carried it inside like a lit match. It's from her attorney, she said, dropping it on the dining room table. Catherine's making her move. Eleanor picked it up with calm hands. Then so are we. She slit the top cleanly with her letter opener. The letter inside was 3 pages, overwritten and theatrical, as if puffed up by the very ego it was meant to defend. It accused Eleanor of coercion, emotional manipulation, and mental decline, rendering recent legal changes invalid. It demanded the reinstatement of Catherine Wren as a rightful heir, or else civil action would be filed for restoration of entitlement and punitive damages. Thomas Hale read the letter from top to bottom with the same expression one might give a child's tantrum in public. Amateurs, he muttered, tapping the page. They don't have standing. We have time-stamped revocations, notarized filings, and 2 witnesses. He reached for a notepad. They're fishing, probably hoping you'll get scared and offer a settlement. I don't scare, Eleanor said. Good, Thomas replied, because I'm going to reply with all the force of hell and a stack of affidavits. Nancy kicked her feet up on the ottoman, smug. That's our Hale. Thomas turned to Eleanor. Still, let's kill the shadow before it grows legs. Schedule a cognitive evaluation, full spectrum. You'll pass with flying colors, but the report locks it down. Proof of capacity, documented by a third party. Eleanor nodded. Book it. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and confidence. Dr. Landon Sutter, a quietly precise man with rimless glasses and hands that never stopped moving, conducted a 2-hour battery of tests: verbal memory, visual sequencing, executive reasoning, emotional judgment. He asked Eleanor to recount sequences, interpret logic puzzles, analyze abstract metaphors. Halfway through, he paused. Your vocabulary recall is exceptional. You teach. I used to. Composition and critical thought. He smiled faintly. It shows. At the end of the exam, he handed her a single sheet with the summary typed in block serif font. Cognitive assessment result. Memory function. Superior logical reasoning. High average judgment and abstract analysis. Above standard psychological status. Stable conclusion. Patient demonstrates full capacity for legal and financial decision-making. Eleanor folded the report and placed it into her tote. Sutter tilted his head, expecting someone to challenge it. They already have, she said. Back at the house, Nancy had a pie cooling on the windowsill like they lived in a world that still made sense. Apple, she announced. We're celebrating. Celebrating what? Nancy slid a copy of the report across the table. Diagnosis, competent. She sliced the pie into 8 exaggeratedly symmetrical pieces. Is it premature to send Catherine a slice? She asked, reaching for plates. I can write enjoy your L in whipped cream. Mia chuckled from the kitchen doorway, tension easing from her shoulders. You're both terrifying. Not terrifying, Eleanor said. Just prepared. Thomas's reply to Hollis and Trent was mailed by certified courier and copied directly to the county clerk's estate registry. It included the notarized will, affidavits from both witnesses, and Dr. Sutter's full cognitive evaluation, each page tabbed, time-stamped, and initialed. By the time it landed in Catherine's inbox, Eleanor had already opened a new folder in her case file. She labeled it, Threats and Retaliations, KW. And as she slid the certified receipt inside, her phone buzzed once. A new voicemail. Transcript. You think a diagnosis protects you? Fine. I'll start with Mia. Eleanor hit save. Her hand hovered over the forward to attorney button. Then she opened her planner, turned to the date, and wrote beneath her earlier quote, October 18th. I'll start with Mia. KW. She underlined it once, then again. Outside, wind scraped across the front shutters like nails. And for the first time since this began, Eleanor smiled. The call came just after 9 a.m. from a number Eleanor didn't recognize. This is Ben Crosby from the Harbor County Clerk's office, the voice said, professional but tentative. I'm calling regarding a deed transfer that came across my desk this morning. It names a Catherine Wren as sole inheritor of 112 Rookridge Lane. Your name's been removed entirely. We flagged it as irregular. Eleanor stood perfectly still in the foyer, one hand resting on the banister. Thank you for flagging it, she said. That property is not subject to transfer, and I never signed any such document. That's what we thought. The signature on file doesn't match your prior filings. It wouldn't. Would you be willing to verify that in writing? I can do one better. I'll bring you the original notarized deed. Today. Eleanor arrived at the clerk's office within the hour. She wore a charcoal coat, the wind at her back, and carried a blue folder so organized it looked like it had never been touched by human hands. Ben Crosby met her at the counter. Early 30s. Wore a tie he didn't know how to knot properly, sweating despite the air conditioning. He motioned her back to a private meeting room. The document Catherine had submitted lay on the table, already separated into pieces by red tags and marker annotations. It looked clean at first glance. Too clean. Eleanor removed the original deed and set it beside the forgery. Notarized 2 years ago. Filed under my late husband's estate adjustment. Witnessed by Thomas Hale and notarized by Etta Vaughn, who has been with this county for 17 years. Ben glanced between the documents. Yours is the only name listed on the valid deed. Yes. And this one has Catherine Wren as the sole successor, with a transfer date of October 17th. Interesting timing, isn't it? Eleanor said lightly. Right after her attorney's threat failed. Ben sat back. It's not just illegal. It's sloppy. He nodded toward the signature on the forged deed. She misspelled Wren in the witness line on page 2. Eleanor didn't smile, but her silence was filled with satisfaction. We'll be adding a fraud notation to the attempted filing, Ben said. It'll stay in the county's internal system. If she tries again, we'll flag it instantly. Excellent. I'd like a certified copy of that note for my records. You'll have it by this afternoon. Later, in Thomas Hale's office, she laid the forged document and the county's fraud notation across his desk, like pieces on a chessboard. She's not just desperate, Thomas said. She's sloppy and criminal. She's reckless, Eleanor corrected. There's a difference. She still believes nothing will touch her. Thomas leaned back. File a police report. If this ever escalates to court, and I suspect it will, you'll want it on record that you pursued every legal avenue. Agreed. I'll call ahead and flag it with the precinct's fraud liaison. Eleanor gathered the documents into her folder. She forged my name on a deed. If she's willing to steal a house, she'll steal anything. Nancy perched in the corner with a lukewarm coffee piped up. What do we do when she forges a version of the truth? Eleanor glanced at her. Then I'll be louder. At the station, Eleanor filled out the incident report with slow, elegant handwriting. Each letter sharp, precise, unapologetic. She listed the date of the attempted filing, the address, the document reference number. Names involved. Under description of incident, she wrote, attempted fraudulent deed transfer by Catherine Wren. Forged signature. Submitted October 17th. Property is mine, lawfully inherited and recorded. Motive likely tied to ongoing estate litigation and retaliatory behavior. The officer behind the desk skimmed it and raised his eyebrows. You've done this before? Eleanor looked him in the eye. No. I just do everything once, and correctly. He nodded and passed her the copy. She folded it neatly and slid it into a fresh folder. Fraud, property level, filed, labeled, locked. That evening, back at home, she found Mia in the living room staring at her phone. What is it? Eleanor asked. Mia turned the screen. A new email. Subject. You think a house matters. Body. You've always been better at locking doors than opening them. Let's see how many stay closed when I start knocking. Eleanor didn't flinch. She picked up her planner, turned to today's date, and beneath the last threat she wrote, October 19th, I'll start knocking. KW underlined. Once, then again. And then she circled the word, unlawful entry. The call came at 11:42 p.m. Unknown number, no voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. Eleanor stared at the screen from her desk, the glow of her planner's open pages flickering in the lamplight. She tapped the green button on the fourth ring. Hello? A pause. Then, you think you're so clever. Catherine's voice cracked like ice under a heel. You think you've won. Eleanor tapped the small gray circle on her phone screen. Recording started. One-party consent. Legal in-state. Precedent noted. I don't think anything, she replied. You always did. Catherine's tone swerved wildly. You thought you were better, above us, like the family was a burden you had to drag behind you. I remember dragging something, Eleanor said evenly. There was a muffled sound on the other end. Fabric shifting, a breath caught. Then Catherine's voice returned, lower, shaking. You erased me, she whispered, like I didn't exist. Eleanor said nothing. You don't know what it was like, Catherine continued. He died, and you left. You got a new life, and me. I was stuck there, with her, with you, picking up everything you dropped. The sob that followed wasn't theatrical. It was raw, unfiltered, a sound not meant for anyone else's ears, but then it changed. I should have been the one to inherit that house, Catherine spat suddenly. Not you. You just married into it. I was it. I lived in it. I gave my life to that family name. And now you're giving your lawyer indigestion, Eleanor replied, cool and measured. He must hate email alerts by now. You're not going to get away with this. Get away with what exactly? The line went quiet. And then, everything you love will rot. One room at a time. Eleanor said nothing. She waited. 4 more seconds of shallow breathing. Then she tapped end call. She stared at the screen for a beat, then exported the audio file to her desktop. Named it Exhibit B, October 20th, 11:42 p.m. She reached for the silver flash drive in her drawer and dragged the file across. The progress bar, filled. Green. Thomas Hale played the recording twice. Once silently, eyes narrowing with every word. The second time, aloud, volume up, pen in hand. He took notes, time-stamped every swing in tone, labeled emotional volatility, marked phrases like, "You erased me, and you're not going to get away with this." When it ended, he looked up. This seals motive and state of mind. It's rage recorded in real time. He scribbled something at the top of the folder. Exhibit B. Psychological decompensation. Nancy leaned against the back of the chair, arms folded. Best voicemail you ever got. Eleanor said nothing. She placed the flash drive into a velvet pouch and slipped it into the fireproof case in her closet. Later that afternoon, Mia stood in the living room with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, staring at the paused waveform on Eleanor's laptop screen. "That was my mom?" Eleanor nodded. "She sounds broken." "She is," Eleanor said. "And dangerous." Mia turned back toward the screen. Her voice was quiet. "I never thought she'd actually try to take the house, or forge something. I thought she just wanted attention, maybe money, not to destroy us." "She doesn't want money anymore," Eleanor said. "She wants control. That's the difference." Mia sat down slowly, the weight of it catching up to her. "That call was awful," she said, hugging the blanket tighter. "But now you're safe." Eleanor gave a small nod, watching her carefully. "That depends on the next move," she said, "and how loud she intends to knock." That night, Eleanor opened her planner. The date was already filled. She flipped to the next page, October 21st, and began a new entry. Predicted escalations. If surveillance fails, direct confrontation likely. She paused, then wrote, "We're past the part where she wants to be understood. Now she wants to be seen." The wind outside picked up again, harder this time. Something, maybe a loose shutter, slammed once against the side of the house. Nancy poked her head into the room. That wasn't the wind. Eleanor closed the planner, slowly, then stood. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish and old arguments. Eleanor sat in the front row of the respondent's side, calm as morning frost, a blue leather binder stacked neatly beside her. Inside, a notarized will, 3 affidavits, a sealed psychological report, and a flash drive labeled Exhibit B. She wore navy. No jewelry, not even a brooch. She let her stillness speak. Across the aisle, Catherine slouched beside her attorney in a too-tight blazer, and rage barely disguised as victimhood. She looked less like a wronged daughter and more like a gambler on her last chip. A twitch in her jaw betrayed her nerves. The gallery was packed. Neighbors, distant cousins, courthouse regulars. Even someone from the Harbor County Gazette sat in the back row with a notepad and a face that promised a headline. The bailiff called the case. The room stood. Then settled. The judge, Honorable Denise Rutherford, adjusted her glasses and opened the case file with a faint sigh. Petition to revoke and annul will revision dated October 14th, submitted by Catherine Wren on the basis of alleged coercion and diminished capacity. Her tone didn't hide the skepticism. Thomas Hale stood first. "Your Honor, we'll be brief. The petitioner's claim rests on unproven allegations, no corroborating evidence, and emotional hearsay. We submit 3 formal exhibits: cognitive evaluation confirming full mental capacity, a notarized and witnessed will with revocation clauses, and an audio file recorded under legal single-party consent." He stepped forward and handed a flash drive to the clerk. The judge plugged in headphones, pressed play, and listened. The courtroom held its breath. Catherine looked down. 32 seconds in, the judge paused, then removed the headphones and handed them back. "Exhibit B," she said flatly, "renders the petition not only unfounded but abusive in intent." Thomas gave a crisp nod. The judge turned her attention to Catherine's attorney. "Do you have anything to counter the medical evaluation or recorded evidence of implied threats?" He shifted uncomfortably. "We acknowledge the evidence presented, Your Honor. Our concern was the speed and exclusivity of the estate revision." "This is not probate gossip hour, Mr. Yates." He sat down. The judge folded her hands. "This court dismisses the petition in full with prejudice. Further, we issue a $2,500 fine to the petitioner for abuse of process and deliberate misrepresentation. Filing fraud will be referred to the DA's office for review." Catherine's mouth dropped open, but no sound came out. Nancy, seated behind Eleanor, exhaled through a sharp grin. And that's the sound of a shovel hitting bedrock. The gavel struck once. The courtroom scattered. Outside, the air was crisp and stung faintly of pine. Reporters waited by the stairs, but Eleanor didn't stop. She moved slowly, deliberately, down the marble steps, past the courthouse columns, binder tucked beneath her arm like scripture. "Mrs. Wren," one voice called out, "any comment on the ruling?" A younger reporter stepped forward, recorder outstretched. Her notepad was labeled, "Feature Family Fraud in Small Towns." "Just one quote," she pressed. "This is going viral. An elderly woman outsmarts her own daughter's scheme. It's being called quietly iconic." Eleanor paused just once and turned her head. "Truth always outlasts noise," she said. The reporter blinked, scribbled furiously, and stepped back. Nancy caught up at the curb, unlocking the passenger door. "You sure you want to keep it quiet?" "No," Eleanor replied. "I want her to know I could say more, and chose not to." She slid into the car and shut the door. Later that night, back home, the Gazette published the online headline, "Harbor County Matriarch Shuts Down Inheritance Coup in Courtroom Showdown." The subhead read, "Judge Cites Abusive Intent, Dismisses Daughter's Claims as False and Manipulative." The photo below showed Eleanor mid-step. Head high, Catherine blurred in the background, half-turned and tight-lipped. Nancy poured a glass of bourbon. "I almost feel bad for her, but then I remember she forged a deed and threatened your granddaughter." Eleanor clicked print on the article, slipped it into a folder. Court, ruling secured. She paused. Flipped her planner to a new page. October 22nd, public opinion shifting. She drew a quiet box around it. Just then, a single envelope slid through the mail slot. No return address. Handwritten. Eleanor stood. Nancy froze, mid-sip. "You expecting more threats?" Eleanor didn't answer. She picked it up, opened it. Inside was a single typed sentence. "You've made your move. Now I make mine." No name, no signature, but Eleanor didn't need one. She walked to her desk, sat down, and opened a new folder. Retaliation. Phase 2. The new lawyer introduced herself via email, cold, clipped, and riddled with unnecessary Latin. Savannah K. Merritt, Esquire, out of Charleston. The kind of attorney who used prima facie in a subject line and billed by the comma. She requested a settlement conference to avoid prolonged litigation and public reputational harm. Thomas Hale read the message twice, then pushed his glasses up and smirked. "She's bluffing. They always open with thunder before they realize they're in a rainstorm they can't stop." Eleanor said nothing. She was already sliding exhibit folders across his desk, one by one. Audit logs, notarized filings, email headers, the audio file, the deed Catherine tried to forge, the signed affidavit from Dr. Sutter, a paper wall 10 inches thick and ironclad. "She wants a meeting," Eleanor asked. "She'll get one," Thomas said. "But we're not negotiating. We're educating." The conference was set for the following Wednesday. Neutral ground, a sterile corporate boardroom at a legal center downtown. Frosted glass, terrible coffee, too much cologne on the receptionist. Eleanor wore black. No jewelry again. Just a stack of manila folders in her lap, and the expression of a woman who had buried things before. Secrets, people, plans, and would not hesitate to do so again. Savannah Merritt arrived 15 minutes late, flanked by an intern and a smile as polished as her shoes. "My client is willing to reconsider her petition withdrawal under the condition that the primary estate assets be equitably divided," she began. Thomas didn't even blink. He slid a folder across the table. "Full audit trail," he said. "Verified signatures, bank records, incident reports, audio evidence. If you proceed, we'll file for sanctions and refer the deed forgery to the state bar for ethical review." Savannah hesitated for the first time. "This is a family matter, Mr. Hale?" He didn't smile. "No, this is a legal one." Eleanor watched her face carefully. That small, flickering shift. Recognition. The case wasn't defensible, and worse, it had been staged under false pretenses. Savannah closed her briefcase. The meeting ended 9 minutes after it began. 2 weeks later, a new letter arrived by courier, this one bearing an official withdrawal of legal representation. No explanation, no salutation, just a form and a signature. Thomas held it up like a trophy. And then there were none. Eleanor took it and placed it in a folder labeled KW, Abandoned Defense. David called the next day, brief, clipped, avoidant. I don't want to be involved anymore, Mom. Catherine's made a mess, and I just don't want to pick a side. You already have, Eleanor replied. He said nothing, hung up 2 seconds later. Mia came home with groceries and flowers. Hydrangeas, she said, arranging them with shy precision. They last, even in the cold. Nancy watched from the armchair, sipping tea. Well, you won't die alone, she said dryly. Your paperwork will keep you company. Eleanor let out a laugh, real, low, and warm. The kind that rested quietly on its way out. Unused and long overdue. Nancy blinked. Was that? I'm allowed, Eleanor said. Mia smiled. You should do that more. Maybe, Eleanor murmured, when the letters stop. That night, the house was quiet again. Not in the old way, tense and uncertain, but still. The kind of quiet you could rest inside. Eleanor sat at her desk, flipping through the planner. Each date was accounted for, every folder filed, every lie answered. She turned to a blank page and for the first time in months, didn't write a threat, or a plan, or a quote from Catherine. She wrote, October 26th, still standing, then closed the book. And just as the clock struck midnight, a single notification blinked across her phone. New email, subject, media request from localtruecrimepod@gmail.com. Body, we'd like to talk about your story. Catherine already did. Eleanor read the words, then stood. The Harbor County Clerk's office was quieter than usual when the claim arrived. It came by fax, sloppy, smudged, improperly formatted. A notice of claim to future interest, filed unilaterally by Catherine Wren and citing anticipated inheritance and contingent asset control. Ben Crosby read it 3 times, each slower than the last. Then he picked up the phone and called Thomas Hale. Mr. Hale, we've received something unusual. Thomas pinched the bridge of his nose. Define unusual. It's a pre-death claim on Eleanor Wren's estate, filed as if she's already dead. She's very much alive, Thomas replied. And fully capable of writing her own name. I figured, Ben said. It's being rejected as invalid, but I thought your office should know. Good instinct, Thomas said. We'll be responding. Thomas drafted the cease and desist in 10 minutes. 3 pages, clean, surgical. Filing of anticipatory claim without legal basis constitutes harassment and unauthorized legal misrepresentation. Any additional attempts will be reported to the County Civil Division and the State Bar of South Carolina. He slid it across Eleanor's desk with a note. We send this tomorrow. If she wants to play preemptive games, we'll teach her about consequences. Eleanor didn't blink. Let her know the future's already spoken for. That afternoon, she called her estate manager and requested an amendment to the trust. It was a simple addition, just a few lines, but it glowed on the page like a lit fuse. Upon my passing, all property held in the Wren Family Trust will transfer directly to the listed beneficiaries under a TOD, transfer on death arrangement, bypassing probate entirely. No claims of entitlement, bloodline, or former legal standing will supersede this directive. Nancy read it out loud, slowly, then looked up from the page. Feels like carving her name out of the family tree with a scalpel. She sharpened the blade herself, Eleanor replied. They drove to the county hall together. The trust amendment was filed publicly, entered into record by 2 witnesses, and notarized in triplicate. On the way out, Nancy flipped her copy over. It's official, she said, sealing the envelope. Even if she shows up at your funeral with a tiara and an affidavit, she's not getting a dime. Eleanor didn't laugh this time, but her shoulders relaxed, just a little. Back at the house, the dining room table had shifted from war room to workshop. Mia sat cross-legged on the floor beside her laptop, stacks of envelopes and confirmation emails surrounding her like snowdrifts. Banks verified the account, she said. Auto donations to the Grant Literacy Fund will trigger quarterly. First disbursement hits January 1st. Eleanor looked over the top of her reading glasses. Amount? $2,000 per cycle, more if the investments hold. I already set the alert thresholds. Eleanor nodded. You've become very efficient. Mia smiled, but there was something tighter in her expression now. When you grow up watching people make messes, you learn how to build fences. Nancy passed her the final round of forms. Speaking of which, let's seal this batch. She opened her portable notary stamp and clicked the plunger once. Thud. Another document finalized. Thud. Another lock on the door Catherine couldn't open. Thud. Last one. Nancy looked up. Everything that matters is in your name, your voice, your hand. She can scream into every microphone she wants. The law doesn't care anymore. Eleanor folded the pages into the folder marked Finalized Estate, Post-Mortem Control. She glanced toward the living room, where the sun had started to vanish behind the trees. The light hit the side window just right, gold on glass, like a signature sealed in dusk. Then her phone buzzed. A new post. Catherine's social feed. Not locked, not deleted. This one was a photo. A close-up of Eleanor's front door. Captioned, "Doors are only locked if you care who's outside." Mia saw it first. "Grandma," she whispered. Eleanor didn't speak. She walked to her planner, flipped to a fresh page, and wrote, October 27th, door photographed, trespassing confirmed. She drew a box, then a line, then a single word beneath it, alarm. The bankruptcy notice was buried 3 clicks deep in a public docket system Eleanor had bookmarked months ago, just in case. She didn't search for it, she just checked. Filing date, October 26th. Petitioner, Catherine Wren, Chapter 13, Status, Active Docket. Number 22, 3 4B. No lawyer listed. Just Catherine. Eleanor sat back in her chair, the screen glowing cool blue against her face. There it was. Evidence of collapse, typed in courier font and filed in silence. She didn't gloat, didn't forward it, didn't even mention it to Thomas. Instead, she opened her estate files and flipped to the clause Thomas had added during the last revision. She underlined it with a black pen. Any individual currently undergoing personal bankruptcy, civil litigation, or tax lien investigation shall be rendered ineligible for disbursement or succession, effective immediately upon filing. She clicked open her trust management dashboard, located Catherine's name in the Access tab, clicked Remove. A soft chime confirmed it. Gone. An hour later, she called the bank. I need to confirm that no communication or authorization requests from Catherine Wren are being honored. The voice on the other end replied, Already updated, ma'am. She's been removed from all financial reference records as of this morning. Flag placed. Thank you. She hung up and stared at the phone for a long time, her reflection faint in the dark screen. The war was over, at least on paper, but a shadow was still circling the edges. That much she knew. 3 days later, an envelope arrived in the mail, pale gray, return address, D. Wren. Eleanor opened it without hesitation. Inside, a single-page letter, handwritten in pen. The lines a bit crooked, the tone careful. Mom, I should have said something sooner. About Catherine, about the money, about how far it all went. I thought if I stayed out of it, it wouldn't land on me. But silence is still a choice, and I made the wrong one. You were right, and I'm sorry. David Eleanor stood in the kitchen a long time, letter in hand. She folded it once, sharply, then again, edges perfectly aligned. She took a fresh sheet of paper, crisp and ivory, and wrote just one line in reply. Accountability is currency. Spend it wisely. She sealed the envelope, addressed it in careful script, and placed it in the outgoing tray. Nancy watched the whole thing from her corner of the sunroom. That's what closure looks like on letterhead, she said, sipping from her chipped coffee mug. Eleanor gave a soft nod. I don't need him to be sorry, she said. I just need him to stop pretending he wasn't part of it. Nancy raised her mug in a toast to truth and legal clarity. That evening, Eleanor pulled out the power of attorney forms one last time. All the fields were already filled. All that remained was the signature. Mia sat across the table, wide-eyed. Me? You're the only one who stayed, Eleanor said. And you never asked for anything. That matters. Mia stared at the document. I don't even know how to be in charge of something like this. You don't have to know everything, just how to ask the right questions, Nancy smirked. And how to double-space documents, save receipts, and threaten lawsuits using words like misrepresentation. Mia swallowed. Okay, she signed. Nancy notarized it with a practiced flourish. Thud. Another seal. Another promise. Eleanor slid the completed form into the drawer where she kept her wedding band, the original deed, and the flash drive marked Exhibit B. She turned to her planner. October 30th. Power of attorney transferred. She paused, then wrote, "Let the next guardian know where the files are and where the bodies aren't." Just as she capped her pen, her phone chimed. A voicemail from an unknown number. She tapped to transcribe. "You think this ends with money. It doesn't. You think I've disappeared. I haven't." Beneath it, 10:13 p.m. No caller ID. Eleanor stared at it, unreadable, then reached for the old safe, dialed it open, and slipped the transcript inside a folder labeled KW, unresolved, and closed the lock. It began with a request from a consumer rights advocacy group in Raleigh. They'd read about the court dismissal, the forgery, the fake claim filed while Eleanor was still very much alive. Someone in their office, an intern, maybe, had clipped the Harbor County Gazette headline and pinned it to a board labeled, "Elder abuse isn't always physical." Now they wanted Eleanor's permission to use her documentation in their next publication, a how-to guide for families navigating elder financial fraud. Eleanor reviewed the request twice before saying yes. She sent over the redacted will, the notarized affidavits, the bank removal logs, the audio transcript, and a screenshot of the planner page labeled October 11th. "You'll die alone just like you lived." They responded within the hour. "This is the most organized retaliation we've ever seen," Thomas Hale called her that evening. "Congratulations," he said dryly. "You're now a textbook." 2 weeks later, First Harbor Bank rolled out a new internal training module for fraud prevention. At the heart of it, Eleanor's method. They called it the Wren Model, a system of time-stamped flags, paper audits, confirmed signatures, and manual entries that couldn't be wiped or overwritten. She had turned a personal nightmare into a bulletproof protocol. Ben Crosby, the clerk who flagged Catherine's fake deed months ago, sent her a short email. Subject: "Thank you, just wanted you to know. Your planner page was used to train 3 new staffers. Your initials might have saved someone else's house." The Gazette followed up in print with a headline that stretched across the Sunday edition. From librarian to legal trailblazer, the woman who fought fraud with filing cabinets. The article detailed the case from beginning to end, without naming Catherine, but made clear what had happened. One of the pull quotes came from Thomas. Eleanor Wren didn't just defend herself. She wrote a blueprint, and she wrote it in ink. Eleanor clipped the article, but didn't frame it. She folded it into a file like any other and tucked it behind the tab marked Press Verified. The final ripple came from Thomas himself. He invited Eleanor to the annual Coastal Bar Association meeting as a guest. He didn't ask her to speak. He just asked if he could present her case during the ethics roundtable. "The younger attorneys need to understand what a slow siege looks like," he told her. "How to win without yelling. How to outlive a lie." Eleanor gave him a single nod. "I trust your summary more than hers." He held up a flash drive, the one with Exhibit B engraved on the side. "She gave us every weapon," he said. "You just had the nerve to aim them properly." Later that night, back at the house, Eleanor sat at the dining table with Nancy and Mia. A fire crackled low in the living room, and the air smelled faintly of old books and the kind of dinner that had cooled but not gone untouched. Nancy scrolled through the Gazette's digital version, squinting. "You realize," she said, "you basically organized your revenge alphabetically." Eleanor tilted her head. "That's just good archiving," Nancy smirked. "No, that's weaponized literacy." Mia looked up from her laptop. "You always told us good writing was about clarity. Turns out good filing is too." Eleanor gave a rare smile. "Good filing," she said, "is good defense." But just as she reached for her tea, her phone buzzed. A new notification. This one wasn't from a court, a bank, or a newspaper. It was from a cloud drive, shared folder, no sender listed. but it was labeled clearly, which parts you missed. Inside, just one file, an audio clip, unopened, time-stamped October 11th, the night of the dinner. Eleanor stared at it. Nancy leaned over. "What the hell is that, Mia? Quiet now." Still. Eleanor didn't click. Not yet. She just leaned back in her chair and wrote the file name on a post-it, then added it to the folder marked KW, still active. And for the first time in weeks, the fire in her eyes wasn't defense. It was readiness. The appellate panel didn't take long. 3 judges, 2 weeks, 1 paragraph. The ruling arrived on county letterhead, stiff and final. The appellant's claims are without merit. Lower court findings are affirmed in full. Petitioner is prohibited from filing any further civil action related to Wren Estate, number 322H, without prior judicial review and written approval. Catherine was officially barred. No more lawsuits. No more probate petitions. No more forged deeds faxed at 3 a.m. Thomas read the decision out loud in Eleanor's dining room, glasses halfway down his nose. Short, blunt, unappealable, he said, tapping the final sentence. They didn't just close the door, they welded it shut. Eleanor nodded once. Good. 2 days later, a check arrived by certified mail, a personal money order from David, accompanied by a simple note. Partial repayment. I know it doesn't fix things, but I want to move forward clean. The amount wasn't enormous, but it was honest. Handwritten. No bank attorneys or disclaimers attached. Eleanor showed the check to Nancy, then walked it directly to the kitchen counter, slid it into an envelope, and addressed it to the Grant Literacy Fund. Nancy raised a brow. You're donating it? It wasn't mine to begin with, Eleanor said. It was leverage. And now it's fuel. By the following week, the check had cleared, the fund disbursement increased, and Mia stood outside the brick office of the literacy program, wearing borrowed heels and holding a nervous smile. Eleanor had driven her that morning. Mia had opened the passenger door and looked at the sign twice, Grant Community Literacy Center, before saying anything. You sure I'm the right person for this? Eleanor had handed her a folder. Inside, her resume, the volunteer hours, a typed letter of recommendation on crisp letterhead signed E. Wren in blue ink. You're the person who stayed, Eleanor said. You're the one I trust to teach others how to stay too. Mia swallowed hard. You'll be okay here? Eleanor smiled. I've got paperwork. And Nancy. Mia laughed, then hugged her tightly before walking inside. That night, Nancy emerged from the hallway with something tucked behind her back. Pick a wall, she said. What did you do? Nancy pulled out a gold frame. Inside, the Gazette article. The headline, bold and unwavering. From librarian to legal trailblazer. The woman who fought fraud with filing cabinets. Below it, in elegant matte. She didn't yell. She filed. Thomas Hale. Eleanor stared at it. Where'd you get this? The print shop. You're not the only one with folders, Nancy said, tapping her own temple. Mine are just slightly more decorative. She hung it in the hallway outside Eleanor's office, right between the coat rack and the fireproof safe. They stood in silence a long moment. You're still expecting something, Nancy said. Eleanor didn't deny it. She turned toward her desk, opened the KW, still active folder, and stared at the unopened audio file. Which parts you missed sat in the cloud, time-stamped, taunting. She hadn't played it yet, but every day it waited, it got heavier. Nancy leaned over her shoulder. What do you think it is? I think, Eleanor said. It's the thing she meant to say to me in person, but ran out of time, or nerve. You going to listen? When it's useful, she said. Not before. Later that evening, she updated her planner. November 3rd. Appellate ruling affirmed. Catherine barred. She flipped back 2 pages and added a red X over, unresolved. Then opened a new folder, Post KW, and began a list. Transfer Literacy Fund to Mia for oversight. Rework end-of-life directives. Archive final documentation. Schedule first speaking engagement, tentative. Visit cemetery, clean his marker. She paused, pen hovering, then added, open the file when it no longer matters what she says. She closed the book, then opened the front door. The air was cold, clean, no envelope, no threat, no sound, just wind. For the first time in months, it didn't feel like warning. It felt like release. Eleanor moved into the apartment just after the first frost. It was a second-floor walk-up in an old brick building downtown, 1 block from the Harbor County Library. She chose it because the floors didn't creak, the rent was fixed, and the window overlooked a quiet stretch of sidewalk where the wind never quite knew where to settle. She didn't bring much, just her planner, 2 file boxes, a tea kettle, and the frame Nancy insisted came with her. The Gazette headline now hung by the front door. Every morning, she passed it on her way to the kitchen, pausing just long enough to tap the glass with one finger. A quiet ritual, a nod to the woman she used to be, and the one she became out of necessity. She didn't miss the house, only the silence it taught her to master. The Grant Literacy Fund awarded its first scholarships in December. 5 recipients, all local, all students who had once been flagged for underperforming. The mayor gave a speech Eleanor refused to attend, but Mia did. She stood in for her grandmother, smiled for photos, shook hands, and handed out envelopes. The next day, she came by the apartment with a stack of thank you cards and a soft grin. "You made this," she said. "No," Eleanor replied. "You're making it. I just paid the invoice." Mia rolled her eyes. "Your name's on the plaque." "That's because I filed the paperwork," Eleanor said, smiling just enough to make it real. David wrote again in January, no apology this time, just an update. He had paid off his remaining debts, joined a community gardening program, taken a job at a warehouse that didn't pay much but made him sleep better. He never asked for money. He never brought up Catherine. And Eleanor never asked him to. They met once. Coffee in the city, no photos, no lingering. A gentle reconnection, no expectations. Just air cleared, one breath at a time. Catherine never called again, not after the appellate ruling, not after the fund announcement, not after her bankruptcy status was made permanent. Eleanor never opened the audio file. She moved it to a separate drive, labeled it Echo No Access. Nancy joked that it was the most poetic act of digital ghosting she'd ever seen. Nancy visited less frequently now, but always on the first Saturday of the month, arms full of dry cleaning, cinnamon rolls, and sarcasm. "You've weaponized minimalism," she said once, looking around the spare, book-lined apartment. Eleanor handed her tea. "Solitude's different when you choose it." Nancy nodded. "Loneliness is an empty house. Solitude is a house with 1 chair and all the windows open." They sat in the open silence for a long while, and then Nancy said it, casually but completely. "She won't recover, you know. Catherine. She'll chase the ghost of that house until the lights go out for good." Eleanor didn't flinch. She chased something that didn't want to be caught, she said. That was her choice. In the final week of March, Eleanor opened her ledger. Not the planner, not a folder. The original ledger, cream-colored, thick-spined, the one she'd kept for decades. The pages were clean, the ink faded. Inside, every estate entry, every notarization, every withdrawal, every allocation logged in handwriting no one could fake. She turned to the last blank page. The paper made a sound like snow settling. She wrote, March 28th, estate settled. Beneath it, she signed her name. Eleanor J. Wren. She dotted the J with exact precision, then closed the book. The binding clicked. Outside, dusk fell in slow layers. She didn't get up right away. She didn't need to. There were no knocks, no calls, no posts. Only the faint, steady rustle of trees against the glass. Eleanor reached for her tea, still warm, and looked toward the door, and in her head she heard the voice again. Not Catherine's, her own. My daughter said I'd die alone just like I lived. She took a breath, no bitterness, no regret, just the weight of truth, spoken without apology. She was right. She smiled faintly. And she'll wait alone for an inheritance I never left.